Hey everybody, what's up? Stingray here again, and this is a remake of my old Worldedit and VoxelSniper terraforming tutorial. Since I made that tutorial, 1, my sound quality has improved, so that's a good thing I guess, and 2, a few things have changed in the way that these plugins work and commands work and things like that, and I thought those 2 things are 2 very good reasons to redo this tutorial in 2020. This time I'm actually gonna split it up. I'm going to split it into 2 main parts, this video being the first one. And in this first part I'm going to talk about the relief, so like the shape of the terrain, and also the basic terrain overlay, like grass overlay, things like that. And in the second part, in the second main part, which will probably come out like in a week from the first part, I will talk about, all the detailing things like tall grass and adding fields and paths and things like that, all the little things that actually make it look good in the end. That's for the second main part. And after those 2 main parts, I'm also going to add a bunch of secondary episodes where I'm just going to talk about certain specific things that I maybe want to talk about in more detail, or just adding additional information that doesn't really fit into the main part and things like that. This would also depend on your feedback, so if you have questions or something, then obviously post that in the comments and I may as well make a video about it. So with that said, let's go. Okay, so the first step in creating some terrain is get in the basic mass. This is where we simply take a bunch of cuboids and chuck them together in a very rough approximation of the terrain that we want to create. To do this, we of course first need to have an idea of what we even want to create. You can't just go ahead and just start terraforming willy-nilly without actually having an idea of what you want the final terrain to be like. So here's the plan that I have for this tutorial. I basically want to create something very similar to this, really just a river with some farms around, but this river will not be just in a straight line like it is here. I want the river to go in a bit of a curve like this, and then in that corner we can have a bit of a hill, and then over here we can have farms. So that's the basic idea, and that's what we're gonna go with and what we're going to strive to create. So, as already said, we will start with creating a bunch of cuboids, and to do that we will of course use Worldedit. Now if you don't know how Worldedit works, basically if I put a block here and I put a block over here, then I can use my Worldedit wand, which is really just a wooden axe, and I can left click this one and you can see it says first position set to whatever that is, and then I can right click this one and it says second position set to whatever. And now it has selected this cuboid that is spanned with these 2 blocks. So if I now do /set stone, you can see it sets everything to stone. I can obviously set it to anything. And what's worth noting here is that with the set command, you don't need to use a single block type. You can use what's called patterns, and patterns can basically consist of multiple block types. So we can say /set, for example, stone, without a space there, important, and cobblestone. And now it will basically have 50% stone, 50% cobblestone. And you can actually provide it with percentages, so let's say 70% stone and 30% cobblestone, and now you can see it's more stone than cobblestone. And basically any time that you need to provide it with something to set to, right, with materials to set to, you can give it a material pattern and it'll just randomize it. You can see if I just call the command over and over again, it'll also always randomize the pattern here, like the which blocks go where, basically. We also have the replace command, so we can replace stone with sponge, and then it replaces only that block type that you provided with the pattern that you provided. So again, we can do, if I just do very quickly, do undo very useful command. There's also redo, by the way, redo. But if we can do replace stone with, again, we can provide it with a pattern. So we can say sponge and oak leaves. And now it has basically replaced all the stone with 50% sponge, 50% leaves. That's what we set it to. So this is basically how we create cuboids. Why did I even try to select that? Let's just set it back to air. And now we obviously want to create the basis for our terrain. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select this block right here. I'm gonna go all the way over here. This is actually gonna be a bit of a fly. Is that the flying equivalent of saying I'm going a bit for a walk? For a bit of a walk? Whatever. Now I've selected this whole plane. So if I now do set /set stone, you can see it basically just creates this flat plane because that's what I selected, right? I didn't actually go into the height. And obviously, to actually get the height in here, if you just quickly undo, I could have just built a pillar up and then selected that, and that is a legit thing to do, but we can do something else as well. We can do /expand, and that expands our selection. So we can say, for example, expand 5 and the direction, which would be up. You can see all the directions that you can give it. You don't have to give it a direction. If you don't give it a direction, it will just use whatever direction you look in. But you can give it a direction. There are 4 absolute directions, north, south, east, west. There are 4 relative to you that are backward, forward, left and right. And then there is up and down. So we'll do up. And now we've expanded the region 5 blocks upwards, and now we can do set stone, and we get this nice plate. And this is a nice base plate for whatever we want to do. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I want to expand a bit in that direction as well. So let's just do expand 20 and set stone once more, and that's better. So that's how you can mess with regions and select regions, expand regions, and set them to whatever base material you want to set it to. Actually, let's expand it a few blocks more. Just a bit of a higher base. It just makes things easier right now in this specific case, because we have this base plate that is separate from the world, but whatever. So we have our base plate here, and now what we want to do is we want to again create smaller cubes for some of the very basic kind of terrain features. So again, as I said, over here we want to have the this little hill, right? So let's just select this area here. Again, it doesn't have to be exact at all. We just want to get a very rough estimate. And we'll again expand 7 blocks up and set stone. And that gives us this basis for our a hill there. Actually, I think I wanna just expand a few blocks more and set that again. And now we can just select from over here. Basically what I want to do is I want this bank of the river, this outer bank of the river, to be a bit higher than the inner one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of this and expand. This is just going to be the exact same thing as we did before. Expand 5 up and /set stone. And here we can actually just use the higher block here and then move all the way over here and select that and set stone. There we go. Again, here we didn't have to expand because we already selected the higher block over in the corner there. So this creates us this very basic structure. We have the hill over there and this little bit of a higher bank over here. And then for the inner bank, we'll also give it a bit of height, but not quite as much. So we expanded that, I think, like 5 blocks. So for this one, we'll maybe just go with 2 or something. Actually, what I'm doing here, one important thing that I'm doing is I'm actually going to go with a lower height than I actually want the final terrain to be, for a reason that I will explain in a bit. But for now, we'll set stone. And that gives us this higher thing here. And we probably want to just cut in here a bit. Set air, and there we go. And this gives us, again, this doesn't look good, it doesn't have to look good, it's just a very, very rough estimation of what the final thing will be. Alright, the next step is to actually get in the shape that we want. And to do that, we need to use brushes. Both Worldedit and VoxelSniper support brushes. In fact, VoxelSniper is only brushes, and we'll get into that in a moment, but I want to first show you the Worldedit brushes. So, when it comes to brushes, Worldedit binds these to items. So you're just going to take out any item except for your wand, that is except for the wooden axe. Just pick out any item, select it in your hotbar, and then what we can do is do not double slash, single slash brush, and the brush takes 3 parameters: the type, as in the shape or whatever it does, its size, and the material pattern. So here what we'll do is sphere. We just want to create a sphere of material, and the next thing is the pattern. Let's just do stone, and for the radius, let's just do 3. And hit enter, and now I can do this, right? I can just simply right click, and wherever I right click will be the center of the brush, and well, you will just get the sphere here. Depending on the type of brush that you use, you obviously get different effects, but just setting materials is kind of like one of the most used effects, or the most used type of brush that you would use. One thing that you will notice is if I just do this thing with sponge and I right click, obviously I'm getting a sponge sphere, but what you will notice if I dig in here is that it actually replaced the stone as well. So this doesn't just work on air, it works on everything. It just sets every block no matter what it was before. You can, however, have it apply only to certain blocks, and this is where masks come in. So what I can do is while with the item selected, do slash mask, and then again give it blocks or block IDs to ignore. No, to apply to. That's the way around. That way around. So if I do slash mask stone, it will now only apply to stone. So if I right click, you can see it creates a sphere, but only where there is stone. So if I dig in here, you can see, you know, it replaced all the stone, but it just didn't do anything above. I can also do an exclamation mark to say not stone, right? This is everything that is not stone. And now, if I dig down here, you can see it didn't replace the stone. So that's how masks work, right? So you have the brush that does something depending on the type of brush, and then you have the mask that says what blocks to apply to. So this is Worldedit brushes. Let's talk about VoxelSniper brushes. VoxelSniper works quite a bit different from Worldedit. Well, in Worldedit, we bind brushes to items, and we can have all sorts of different items for all sorts of brushes in our inventory at once. In VoxelSniper, you have one brush setting, and that's just the one that you have active right now, that is. And VoxelSniper has 2 predefined items that you use. That is the arrow and the gunpowder. And well, basically your current brush setting applies to these 2 items. So the first thing I'm gonna do is do /D. This just resets my brushes to their default values, as the chat says. And if I now right click with the arrow, you can see it just pokes little holes here, because by the default setting, the brush type is snipe, that just means a single block, and material is air. So what we do is we place single blocks of air. That is exactly what's happening here right now. Obviously, that's not exactly interesting. We want to create balls and things like that. So what we do is we do /B. This changes our brush, and we'd say B for ball. We can do all sorts of different types again, but we'll do B for ball, and we just hit enter. We don't give it a size or a material or anything like that. We just do /B and then the type, and that just sets our type. And you can see it now set our brush type to ball, which is the equivalent of the sphere for Worldedit. Our brush size is now 3, and our voxel is still air. So to change our material, we do /V for voxel, that's the material, and we say stone. That sets our material to stone, and if we now click, you can see it creates spheres of stone. We can also do B and then a number to change the size. So if I do B8, then it's a radius of 8 and it creates a rather large ball. Just like Worldedit, VoxelSniper obviously has an undo function. Here it's just /U. So if I undo everything, we can now actually start. Oh, actually, before we start, the difference between the arrow and the gunpowder, right? That's kind of an important thing. For most brushes, the arrow and the gunpowder only differ in the center points of the brush. So while with the arrow, the block you point at is the center point. So this stone block here would be the center point of the brush. I am an idiot. Let's take a proper brush size first. Now the center, as I said, the block that you point at is the center. So this stone block will be the center, and we get this kind of sphere. Now with the gunpowder, the center block will be the block to that side, like the block that you would place. So if I click here, that's the block I would place. So that is the center block for the gunpowder. And if I click here, you can see that it's actually, the sphere is actually one block higher. And that is the difference between the two for most brushes, but not for all of them. And we'll get to that in a bit. So to actually create the terrain that we want, we'll simply use any of the sphere brushes and just right click. And with this, we create a bit of terrain. And actually, I am noticing that I probably want to have a bigger brush here. This is just the thing that you gotta try out. The settings that you're gonna need to use are gonna be different every time, just depending on the terrain that you're gonna create. So it's just a bit of trying it out and finding out what works best in the given situation. So here we can just put a string of brushes here. This already creates a bit of a more of a less blocky terrain, but obviously this doesn't look very good yet, but we'll figure that out in a bit. So by just doing this, we can now have we can now smoothen out the terrain just a little bit, not really a whole lot, but you know, a little bit. And using a bit of a smaller brush, I can also give it a bit of terrain here. Because as I said, these would be like the little bit higher banks of the river, right? So I want to recreate that a little bit here. We don't need to be that exact. We want to be more exact than in the preparation step with the boxes, of course, but we don't have to be that exact because we will now, right now, we will use more brushes, more different brushes. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna switch to the brush type. So I'm gonna switch to the E type. The E type is the erosion brush. So, and the erosion brush actually needs a subtype. So we'll do melt. And now the erosion brush has been set to melt, and we don't have to set any of the size values or anything. If you just want to keep the previous ones, we can just keep the previous ones. That's how VoxelSniper works. So the erosion brush does exactly what you would expect. It erodes away on your material. Now there are three main types. There's melt, fill, which fills, and smooth. Now Melt and fill are obviously opposites, and this is where the difference between the arrow and the gunpowder is more significant, because here the arrow will be whatever type you set, in our case that is melt, and the gunpowder will be the opposite type, so in this case that would be fill. And this is really useful because it means that you don't have to switch, that you don't have to use commands all the time to switch between the two types, which is very useful because you're gonna use both types very often. So if I just click on this corner here, you can see it just erodes away parts of this cube. And I can erode away parts of this. And now if I select the gunpowder, again, that's the fill command, I can use that, just fill things in like this. And I'm noticing that I once again want to use a bigger brush size. And this is, it's really like sculpting. You can think about it like sculpting. Will take away things where we need to take away things to get the effect that we want. And we'll add things to create the effect, or we'll add things where we need to. Okay, so I filled in a bit of the terrain here, and you'll notice that the top of the hill here is still a bit flat, and that is because the hill is not big enough. So we'll simply switch back to the ball brush and create a bunch of spheres here, and then switch back to the erosion brush and just use this newly found material to create more stuff. One thing to note is you'll notice that as I click with the erosion brush here, it won't add any more material. Even though I'm clicking on the side of this wall, it won't like add out from that wall. Because the way that the fill brush works is it'll only fill in concave material, or concave areas, let's say. So a concave area is an area like this, bit of an inwards facing kind of thing, right? You know what I mean. And that's only, it will only fill in that kind of stuff, but it won't create new planes on the side here, for example. And that is why we needed to add more spheres on top to be able to draw out the hill a bit further. So I gotta keep that in mind. It's actually a really useful property of the fill erosion brush, because it means that in a place like this, I can just click here to create terrain, and I don't have to fear that I will go outside of the bounds of what I want to create. Now, you will notice that we have not created the river yet. So the idea is that the water line of the river will actually be this level here. This will be the water level of the river. So actually we need to dig in here to create the river. So what we'll do is I actually use a smaller brush, and I'll set the material to air, and this way we can now, and I'm gonna set the brush to ball, and this way we can now just dig in and create the river. For the river, we're only gonna create the central ridge of the river. Ridge is probably the wrong word, but you know what I mean, right? Like the center line. Hello, lag. The center line of the river is what we're going to create, and the rest of the river, like the actual width of the river and the shape of it, we'll do all of that with our trusty erosion brushes. So now with the melt brush, I can just melt this away, and just like this, get a better riverbed. That's the word that I was looking for. You will notice that this still looks very much disconnected, and one of the tasks that we'll have right now is to actually blend these in with one another, to blend these top things in with the river that we just created. And this is really just a matter of filling things in and eroding them, and then filling back in and eroding. It takes a bit of practice, but you know, it's not really rocket science in that sense. It just again, it needs a bit of practice, but you'll be able to do it. It's not that difficult. Just the more I draw in here, the more I can blur the line between this top part and the bottom part. But obviously that will probably be drawn out or drawn in too much, so I have to draw it back out with the fill brush. And that's what you're gonna do, right? So just using the erosion and the fill brush to blend these in with one another. Obviously we want to do the other side as well, and I think I'm gonna deepen the river, but we're gonna do that in a bit. Here we don't have to do that exact stuff because we don't have anything properly done with that place yet. But you know, we just want to create a bit of a rough outline for this side of the river as well. Alright, here we are, and I have just used Worldedit to select basically everything below the waterline of the river, which now allows me to do / replace air, water, and we'll get a river. Now this is obviously not the final river that we'll create, but doing this allows us to just get a feel of what we already have and where things still need work. I'm gonna undo this to be able to continue work with VoxelSniper on the terrain itself. Now we haven't done anything with this plane yet, and there's a reason for that, because I want to show you a trick that I'm using to create large flat areas like this, because we could of course just blend these in right now and call it a day, but the problem is that this is a really flat area, and we want it to be a flat area. We want it to just be flat fields and stuff. But the thing is that a 100% flat area like this feels and looks super natural, and we just don't want that. So we want a little bit of variation in there, and we can achieve that with a little trick that I'm using, and that is to use the ball brush with stone material, of course, and with a rather small radius, like 2, there. And this allows me to just chuck on all of these little spheres here. Maybe creating a few larger ones, well, not larger ones, higher ones. With the fill tool, we can also stack them in places where you maybe want to have it a bit higher. And then once we just fill it in a little bit, it doesn't really need to be a lot, we can then use our fill erosion brush with a relatively sizable size to then just fill this in. And doing this, we will be able to create areas that are flat, but not 100% flat, right? That's exactly what we want. We want it to be flat, to be able to put fields and paths on and whatnot, but we don't want to have it be 100% flat. So doing this, this is a bit more work than just creating a flat plane, like obviously, but it's really paying off, because creating terrain like this really looks way better than just creating a flat plane and calling it a day. Alright, here we are, and you can see that with this, the terrain still looks a little rough. It looks rough everywhere, and we'll fix that later on, but you can see it's still pretty flat, but it's not 100% flat, and this just gives it a much more natural look. One important mindset kind of thing is to just not try to make everything neat and tidy and all of that, because nature is the exact opposite of that. So for example, over here we had all of the little bits that was taken out from the spheres were flattened out by the erosion brush, except for one which started to grow as I continued clicking on it, and it created this little badge here that is just a little higher. And I could be like, oh no, it's supposed to go up from the river, right? But so I'm gonna clean this up. But no, actually having these little pretty random pieces of just higher or lower terrain is what makes it look more natural. So just embrace the randomness or something like that. It's really a thing that really works out. Here, for example, I had a few spheres that were stacked quite high. So they created this little tiny, not really a hill, but this tiny elevation. And I could say, okay, I wanted this to be flat, but again, that would be unnatural. And just saying, okay, I'm just gonna let it be there, actually makes it look more natural. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So with this, the terrain is, in terms of the very rough shape, almost finished. There's some stuff left here, so I'm just gonna do that very quickly, and then we'll get into making this look smooth. So by the way, over here you can see that we have these little terraces, right? We have this bottom of the riverbed, then we have this place here, then we have this terrace, and then we have this terrace. And as I use the brushes, they are just pushing back and forth the boundary layers of these terraces. This is not what we want. We want this terrain to actually be like smoothly going up. And to do that, what we gotta do is we'll use either the fill or fill or melt erosion brush, and we'll just inch our way towards one of these borders and just try to pull out small blocks like that, and then we can use these to start drawing out larger chunks, and then we can use that as a base to create more smooth terrain. So again, this is just like with blending in these parts here before. This is just drawing things out and then pushing them back in, and drawing out and pushing back in, and doing that over and over until you have the result, or until you have a result that you're happy with, really. So now you can see that now this terrace is really pretty much gone, and now we have this terrace still left over here. So if I do this, and then again I'm gonna use these melts to kind of push this in and out, and that way we just got rid of this hard edge between the terraces as well. And again, I'm just gonna continue doing this to create the smooth terrain that I like. Alright, here we are with the terrain so far done. There's one last step to the shape of the terrain, and that is that, well, as you can see, it still looks a bit like a rugged wasteland or something, like there was some war raging or whatever, right? And this is obviously not what we want. We want some nice and smooth terrain, and to do that we are going to use yet another erosion brush, and that is, well, the third one. So B, E, smooth. We can give it a bit of a larger radius and just click everywhere, and it, you know, the smooth erosion brush does exactly what it says. It smoothes things out, and as I click around, you can see that, you know, this terrain that I just clicked on really just is smoother and looks pretty neat. So that's just what we're going to do over the entire thing, and we'll be back in a second. Alright, here we are. I'm just leaving the water in right now just to show that it's actually looking pretty neat already. So I basically, as you saw, I went over everything with the smooth erosion brush. Don't overdo it with the smooth erosion brush though, because there is such a thing as too smooth terrain. So don't just click on every place like 15 times or something. That's too much, right? Just you want to go over it and always look, are you happy with the results? Sometimes you want smoother terrain, sometimes you want rougher terrain. So just always go lightly, then see, do you like it? If not, if it's still too rough for you, then go over it again. But once you like it, just leave it. Just once you like it, it's fine, right? And with that said, we are basically finished with creating the shape of the terrain. What's now left, actually, before we go over that, I want to show you one last brush that I didn't use here and that I'm not going to use here because I don't need it. But one brush that you can use is the blend ball. It's BB for blend ball, and it's kind of like the smooth erosion brush, but it also works a bit different. So first of all, it's more aggressive and it has a tendency to push down your terrain. So if I click here, you can see it actually just draws it in, right? And in with the and you can see that it makes it really smooth to the point that it's really just straight lines. And the gunpowder actually draws out terrain, like draws it up in a relative fashion like this. And then you can use the blend ball again to, you know, smoothen out your terrain. Again, I don't need it here, but if there's a place that it's too rough for you and the smooth erosion brush just doesn't cut it, you can use this one. So for example, here, the smooth erosion brush actually left this kind of mini cliff as it was. I really like this, I kind of want to keep it, but if you don't want to keep it in this case, or if I wouldn't want to keep it in this case, then I could just use the blend ball to really get rid of it. So that's that. And with that said, we are done with the shaping. So the last thing for this video is creating the overlay. So we obviously don't want our terrain to just be raw rock. We want some dirt and grass and things like that. So let me just quickly do undo to get rid of the water. And to do the overlay, we are going to use VoxelSniper yet again, because VoxelSniper also has an overlay brush. So to do that, we do B over for overlay. And then again, this needs a subtype. So this is going to be D and then the depth that you want to go into. So let's just do D2 and do V dirt. And with this, we can now create a dirt overlay. And actually, if you go to this little cliff here, you can see that it only goes too deep and the stuff below is just left stone. You will also notice if I click here that it doesn't go above, right? So I clicked on this layer and it actually doesn't overlay the top at all. Like even if I check this out, you can see it didn't like do that layer either. So only places where the top layer of surface is at most the layer that you clicked on, only those will get an overlay, and that will be very useful, as you'll see in a second. But first of all, you want to create this dirt overlay, and then afterwards we want to create a grass overlay. So let's do that. I'll actually use a larger brush size, a relatively large brush size, and just overlay everything. Alright, dirt overlay done, so we want to do the grass overlay, so V, grass, and B over D1, because obviously the grass should only go 1 deep, and again, do the same thing once more. Okay, here we are, and like this, it already looks quite a bit nicer than before, but there's one thing that's still not very nice, and that is that the riverbed is grass as well, and that doesn't really make a lot of sense. The riverbed should really be dirt. So what we can do is here we can actually use the property of the overlay brush that I just talked about, that it only overlays on places where the top layer is at most the layer or the height that you clicked on. So now we can do V dirt. We don't have to change anything else. We only need to change V to dirt, and you can see I can basically overlay dirt into the riverbed. So if I just do replace air water real quick to see where my waterline is. Here's my waterline, so this is the highest level that I want to replace. So undo, boom. And now I have my top layer, and I'm just gonna continuously click on this very layer on both sides, of course, to just turn all of the riverbed into dirt. And because it only overlays on places where the top layer is below the height, or at most the height that you clicked on, it won't change anything above the riverbed. And here we are with the riverbed that's actually not made of grass anymore. Obviously my riverbed is dirt now. You can use gravel or something if you prefer, but you know, that's up to you. Now let's just put back the put back the water in. Replace air water, and that is it. One quick last thing. Obviously the water is kind of flowing out here, and that's not very nice. So let's fix that by just putting a block there, putting a block here, selecting this, and double slash set barrier, and that just sets barrier blocks all over the place, and that just keeps in the water. We'll do the same thing on the other end as well. I'll put a block down here, put a block up here on water level, select the area, and set barrier. And there we go. And that concludes this video. We have created the general relief of the terrain, and we have created some nice overlay. Now, as I said, in the next episode, we'll talk about all the details, like the farms and grasses and all that kind of stuff. And we'll do all of that in the next episode. So subscribe for that. And other than that, obviously, likes and comments and subscriptions and all of that kind of stuff is very much appreciated. Check out my Discord channel, link in the description. And yeah, That's it. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.